You're listening to the New Story podcast from New Story Church in Kansas City. To learn more about New Story Church, visit our website at www.newstory.church.
Welcome, everybody, to the Equip Podcast, where we're equipping you to live out your Christian life as you faithfully love God and love others with truth and grace. My name's Jeremy, one of the pastors here in New Story. I'm privileged to work with our students and our creative team. Some of that's going to be changing soon in some good ways. Excited to share that in the near future. But today, I'm joined by someone I haven't been joined by in a little bit. And also, we haven't done a video in a little bit. But I want to introduce him, someone that you know, someone that you probably love and that I love. It's Ray Jarrett. Say hey.
Yay! Ray Jarrett with Unite KC. I'm the executive director, and we are trying to get everybody to do one good thing.
Explain that real quick. Do one good thing.
So the whole idea is that people can rid themselves of their misgivings, their misinformation, by getting to know one another.
Yep.
And so there's a heart transformation, and that begins with doing one good thing together.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, thank you. Thanks for being on the pod today.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, so I've known you for a few years now, and we've had plenty of conversations on here, and you came and taught last year here at New Story. What are you doing right now? Obviously, it's still Unite KC, but I know there's been some changes and stuff recently too, which are kind of cool.
Yeah, really big news is that it actually all kind of got started with the horrible shooting after the Chiefs parade or during the Chiefs parade, and so the church got together, your church included, with a bunch of other churches here in the metro, and we wanted to do more than just say, hey, we're with you, praying for you.
Yeah.
So we started a fund. And this was crazy because the very next day my phone blew up from sun up to sundown. But it was all in helping to coordinate this effort. And as you know, we raised almost $200,000 in just a week. And,
so cool.
So it's a website, the money, a way to distribute the money, and just getting a hold of all of the people. So it was a great triumph. And we were able to show love and support for people who are suffering mentally, physically from this horrible thing that happened.
Yeah, and where does that money go?
So that money is in a fund, and we have distributed about $40,000 to date. And we actually helped defray all of the costs for Lisa Galvin's funeral expenses and stuff like that. Very cool. It's been a joy for myself and other people in the faith community to know that we could come together that quickly on something like that. So guess what? We said, if we can do that, what else can we do?
Yeah.
So we had a forum, held a meeting, about 112 people showed up, and we put together a laundry list of things that we felt like would make Kansas City a flourishing city. So during that time frame, a guy that I know that we've been friends and been walking with each other missionally for a while, just started kicking around the idea of, well, what if we merge? What if we showed the city what unity really looks like?
Yeah.
And so on June the 1st, we merged. So Love KC, led by Gary Kendall, and Unite KC merged, and we are doing all the paperwork stuff later, but we are officially one unit, and we are going to kind of walk together until probably the last quarter of the year. So that is very exciting news for us.
So what was Love KC doing that kind of aligned with the mission of Unite KC?
Well, as you know, we've got all these different lanes, and one of them is church and family.
Yeah.
And even though we're trying to make sure that church and family tent remained pretty large, and so what we did was we just kind of made sure that, and I think I even heard you preach on it. So here's closed hand stuff, and this is open hand stuff. So we've tried to stay open handed, and what that sometimes meant is that evangelistic things and missional things that had to do specifically with the canon of the Bible and the church, we had to kind of just say, okay, there's other people in the community doing those things, and Love KC is one. So, so they've got this banner of human flourishing that they've been trying to make sure that they brought to Kansas City, and they've got 5 different regions, and so it's very evangelistic. And so we got them together, the church partnership and the church domain, and it just fits so well.
Yeah.
Because we can take on more now. So it's really great. We're totally excited about it. So.
And you guys just had one of it. I think it's one of the coolest things that you guys do, the Walk for Unity. And it broke my heart that I was going to be out of town when it was there, because I've shot it a few times.
Yes.
And I got asked this year and couldn't make it. How was the day? How'd it go?
Oh my goodness,
the weather looked better than the year before.
Yeah.
But.
So it didn't rain and drizzle, which that's all it was a drizzle. So if you didn't come last year, but. It was so I would have liked a little bit more partly cloudy.
Yeah.
But it was still, I don't think it got above 80 the whole time.
Good.
Great weather. The crowd was larger, more people who had never been. It was
great.
Everybody says it was the best one. So
yeah, and I love that for me. That's a huge win for you guys, of having people who haven't done it before. Coming. Now,
Yes.
I should, obviously want people to come back, but people who haven't done it before coming, and then learning about what you guys are doing, hopefully finding relationships with somebody that doesn't look like them.
Yes.
Because that's always the goal. That makes me really happy that there's a lot of people there that hadn't been there before. It's great.
Yeah, you know what? That, to me, when I step back, of course, 2,000-3,000 people showed up. Well, there are some logistical things that would have made that a nightmare. But one of the things that I am so happy about is that I've gotten over my obsession with numbers.
Yeah.
And I understand that there are perfect crowd sizes to every meeting that we have. Same thing happened at the Underground, which was at the beginning of the year. So I do this curtain thing with Jeremiah and whoever else. And I said, hey, who's never been to Underground before? Raise your hand. And I'm telling you, 75% of the audience raise their hand, which means incrementally between all of our big events, more and more people are finding out about our mission and thinking that it's a great thing to do. So, yeah.
I love the Underground. I've talked about it a bunch. That's not my lane as far as ballet and all that, dancing.
Man.
Not my thing, but I've seen it 9 times and I still love it.
Right.
It's still really cool.
Yeah.
The way they can communicate without words is something.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
I've never seen before. Now, one of the big things that I wanted to talk to you about is something that's really important in amongst people in our culture this week, and it's Juneteenth.
Yes.
June 19th, which is Wednesday, I believe.
That's right.
Wednesday. Now, growing up in a white church, a white background, Juneteenth is not something I really ever heard about.
Right.
I remember hearing about the emancipation being much later. Obviously then the Emancipation Proclamation, sure, the word went out, but getting to the extremes, that took a long time. And I remember hearing about that, but didn't ever know of it or recognize it as a specific day. And the black church, black culture, very different on that front. And I grew up, my school was majority minority. And that was not the best way of saying that.
Majority minority? That was actually classic. I might try to use that.
I was a minority in my school growing up. And a lot of my community too. And so, it was, I'm surprised I didn't hear about it, but something I wrote down a few questions, but can you explain a little bit more about what Juneteenth is, why it's celebrated? I think we did briefly, but
right. I will try to talk in sound bites, but I think that I have a personal story that goes with this, and I'll tell it later, but it might come as a surprise to you that I didn't know too much about Juneteenth until I was an adult. And it's for the same reason, and we've talked about this before too, is that we were raised in the same educational system. And so where your gaps of understanding are lacking, mine too.
Yeah.
So kind of just a couple of things that are really important. And the thing that's funny about this is that I'll go over this little snippet of timeline and history, and most people don't even know the American history part of it. so it's pretty. So as you know, so we got these colonies and stuff, and we got states, and then the main agricultural backbone of our country came from the South, and that was all of the produce and the tobacco and stuff, and the backbone of that was slavery.
Yep.
So we were like, we got to grow more stuff. Let's go get some slaves. And so pretty soon there was this thing where they were like, we don't need to really be a part of the United States. We just want to. And so there were 11 states that removed themselves from the Union. And so that was the thing that kind of set this thing in motion, because it wasn't really that. I mean, people knew that slavery wasn't right, but there was already a move afoot to kind of justify it from a biblical standpoint.
Very much so.
Yeah, and if you can actually turn a person that looks like a human into an animal, then it's easy to kind of go, okay,
dehumanize, and it's super easy to take advantage of.
And then you're done. So, okay, you have that. You got this separate. We have a civil war. The Union starts winning the war against the Confederates, and then so now they've got a little leverage to kind of go, this whole slavery thing is not right, and this is not going to sound right, and you'll probably get kicked out of the ecumenical circles for me saying this, but I can
We're gonna edit it out.
Yeah, I can actually at least. I can at least put myself in those people's shoes. Okay, let me see if I got this right. You depend on us for food and all this other stuff, and if you outlaw slavery, I don't know how I'm gonna. I mean, I'm rich, and I don't know what's gonna happen to me and my family.
I'm gonna lose everything.
I'm gonna lose everything, and so from that capitalistic mindset, which I still have, I could see how there could be some angst. And I could even see
feels
how
like a necessary evil
that's right.
for your livelihood.
And on my slides, that's exactly what I have, necessary evil. But I could even see how you could talk yourself into thinking it's okay because of that. That is so near to our hearts. So you have all that. Then you have the reason that we're celebrating Juneteenth, which is, there was an Emancipation Proclamation that said, if you're in a Confederate state, your slaves don't have to report to you in the morning. So it's over. And so, but they really couldn't enforce that. And so that's why it took almost a year and a half for those Union soldiers to get to that part of Texas and go, hey.
They couldn't post about it or send a mass text out.
That's right.
Like I get mass text from the presidents,
Right.
Didn't have that opportunity back then.
Didn't have that. And it sucks for them because who knows what families were separated. That somebody had to know and weren't going to tell the slaves, and whole thing.
Yeah.
It's so we see this date in history come around. So it was 1863, it was 1865, but there's a lot of things to unpack about why I feel as a Christian you should want to help celebrate Juneteenth.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take a breath and let you.
No, I would love to hear it. If you could just keep talking and never stop, never
That's
breathe,
right,
that'd be
never
good. Keep the stream going. No, I think me and Pierce talked about this recently, but when it comes to like the Civil War and things like that, a lot of it's like, oh, well, it wasn't fought over slavery. It was fought over states' rights. That's usually what you hear. And the part that's missing out of that is states' right to do what?
Right.
Own slaves.
Right. That's right.
That's the primary reason. So, and so this whole war was fought to try and keep this, what really was a backbone of the economy, in place. And the Christians went right along and dehumanized. I mean, there was even the advent of the slave Bible that removed certain aspects of the Bible. This isn't a myth. This is verifiable. You can go just Google search this. Maybe I'll put a link in the description. But the slave Bible, that they took all the passages out about freedom and being that Christ frees us. Took all that out, which is the beauty of the gospel to begin with, and that just shows the willingness of Christians to participate in something that was morally abhorrent, and they knew it because they had to edit the Bible to make it so.
To edit and what would we think about somebody that goes, hey, I've got a new version. This is the Ray Jarrett version. You've heard of King James?
Yeah.
But several things.
Unless you're a Greek scholar and you're actually translating the New Testament.
That's right.
Okay.
But just to go, don't need these parts. You
Yeah.
know? So that's, but you know, the one thing there's two things that fascinate me about Juneteenth, not just as a historical thing, but as a Christian. And it's the comparison between American slavery and the history about what happened with the Jews. And then the second thing is that there is a larger narrative to be told about why it's so important in context with the rest of history. So I just went through, you know, slides A through J about what happened before Juneteenth.
Yeah.
What happened after is the most scariest period of American history, and I don't even know how someone like my grandfather lived through it. So I'm going to give you
real quick, in brief, Juneteenth is what?
Juneteenth is. Are you talking about the date? When is it?
No. What is the celebration of? It's
Yes.
Just in a soundbite form.
Yeah. So Juneteenth is a celebration when everybody in the United States knew about and could participate in the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
it went out 1863. By 1865 was the time that
The last,
they heard.
I forget how many, 25,000 people were.
Yeah.
So don't quote me on that number, but it was about like that. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay. Sorry. Carry on.
No. So my grandfather was born in 1912. Okay, he's gone on to be with the Lord. He lived to be 99 years old, but he's one of those important people who bridged the gap between then and now. So he was old enough to where his Uncle Grant was a slave and knew about slavery and all this other stuff. Isn't that crazy?
It to know that like you're essentially one degree removed from that. It feels so long ago, but it really wasn't.
It really wasn't.
Yeah.
And so his Uncle Grant told him something that is just mind-blowing. And so he said, you know, I was at the tail end of it. He was born in the 1860s or something like that. And so he was at the tail end of slavery, and he happened to have what they call a good master. So this was a person who believed in the word and believed that people should be treated humanely. So he treated his slaves more like employees. You know, he was benevolent, gave them time off, you know, made sure they were well fed. Not that slavery's ever, you know, something.
Yeah,
because when you tell people, well, if it's good, you know, how bad could it have been? And then you go, well, would have wanted to do it? And then they go, oh, wait a minute.
That shows you how bad it may have been.
Easy, big fella. Easy. So, but he said that the years following in Reconstruction and the Jim Crow era, which lasted 100 years, were the scariest so my family ends up in Kansas City because my grandfather was like, you know, it's not safe in the South. And he's got a miraculous story that I won't go into, but they end up in Kansas City North, where his family at least has a chance to walk the streets without being killed or his sons being killed. So, so Juneteenth is great in that we can memorialize this wonderful, basically second kind of celebration of freedom. Yeah. But the aftermath of that is just so much more horrific than what was done to those few people who were still left in slavery for another year and a half. Yeah.
So the Emancipation and Juneteenth wasn't a finish line. It was a starting line.
Yeah.
And
we got off to a scary start.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my other personal story about this is that I went, I guess it was 2 years ago, I went on a civil rights tour. And, you know, they went through all these southern states. And in Tennessee, they have a lynching museum. Have you heard of this thing?
No.
Wow, you should look it up.
Goodness.
It is.
Well, I guess I'm taken aback by just a lynching museum, as you should be. But it's like, I guess it'd be similar to a Holocaust museum.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. And so it's very impactful in the way that they did it, because these large obelisks of their steel, and they're hanging from like a huge. It's got to be 50 feet high, but there's one for every state, and they list the names of these people who were lynched, and they list the reasons and things like that. And so there was this whole movement to go, okay, the law is the law, but by golly, we're going to have it our way. And so, I mean, there's just a really long and horrific. You should look up Jim Crow. You just Google it, and you can see a lot of the horrible things that happen. But my take on this is that maybe there is another day coming, post-civil rights era, where we celebrate a day that people not only were not slaves anymore, but now they're really full citizens, able to participate in the American economy, all the other things like that. And so I'll finish this up pretty quick. I have a relative, he was an uncle, and so he served in Vietnam. And one of the cool things about the Vietnam era coming out of it is that they wanted to reward these servicemen for fighting for their country. And we also realized that we had very, very rich people in the United States and very poor people. So this creation of a middle class was going to be done by the GI Bill. And so the GI Bill is going to give you two or three major things. You can go to college, really step up in life. You can get a loan for a business, and then you can get a house, almost free. You just got to make the payments. So in effect, that GI Bill created the middle class, and then after that, you can really build wealth in your family. So those people most of them are gone on to be with the Lord, or we hope they went home to be with the Lord. but they were able to pass on houses and stuff like that. But they really denied that to Black Americans, and so you look at my uncle, who he's gone on to be with the Lord. Tried to get into college. They said, you can go to college, but you can't go here. He tried to get a loan for a business. He was an air conditioner guy. They weren't going to do that. And then last but not least, he wanted to live after he kind of recovered from that, he wanted to live where he wanted to live. But we had racially restrictive covenants. And I don't like giving people a pass on, because you're dealt the cards you dealt. And that's the hard part about who I am. I got an ace and I got a twos, and I just got to make this work. But I could see how his spirit was crushed. And he ended up in his last days living with my grandparents, and he just never really recovered from.
There's a promise made, and then you're just denied it because of a characteristic, an immutable characteristic, something you can't change.
So Juneteenth marks a celebration, and I always like to think it's proof that it's actually the American dream, which is if you just grit your teeth and make it through it, if you just show that you have an indomitable spirit, you can probably break through. And so that's what it represents to me. And it also represents that something that's even greater, and it's a spiritual truth, which is God is always going to help the oppressed. I mean, he did it with his people. He did it with getting slaves free. You're just not gonna. And the scariest scripture in all of the Bible to me is this. What was that? So this is where you're good and I'm just rusty.
We'll see. Don't put me on.
But remember when the Pharisees or the religious leaders were meeting and they were talking about stopping the disciples, and the guy got up and he goes, "Why don't we just let this roll? Because if they're just charlatans, it's going to come to nothing. But if we're fighting against God, we can't win this."
It was in Acts with Peter and John when they were starting to be a little bit more bold with their preaching. They were like, if this is of God, you're going to find yourself fighting against the God that you say you worship, and that's a scary.
That's
scary
a
thing.
bad thing, and which is why I will never talk about a preacher, a man of God, a person. we all fall short.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you what, if God's hand is on that person's life and He's got a purpose for them, you don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, you gotta be careful. I mean, there's a level of accountability and there's qualifications with the position.
That's really good.
And so the unfortunately, it's often like you can take that position and take it to an end that's unhealthy, to where you're untouchable and you can get away with all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. And the other thing though is I've noticed. So I got this gray hair now. It should be good for something. But I've noticed that there are people in the body of Christ that God has specifically, you can tell that He has put them in the position of offering correction.
Yeah.
I mean, and they do it so well. I mean, they know where, how hard to be and where to apply the scripture, where to apply love, and they lovingly restore those people at least to the point where they're not in sin and bondage to sin anymore. Whether they ever get to a point of being where they were before is not my call.
Yeah, so there is a lot of wisdom in knowing and in applying discipline.
Yes,
that goes for parents in applying discipline to their children.
Yeah,
and it goes for church discipline. It goes for any type. I think it takes a lot of wisdom that many of us don't necessarily possess to be able to do well. But some people are incredibly gifted, like
they are. And so if you're not that person, I mean, if you are that person, you know who you are. You know where God's called you. Yeah. But if you're not, I just don't want to be a person who oppresses God's people, because it's just like I said.
That's fair. I think that's fair. Absolutely. You don't want to be on the opposite side of the Lord. Anyone who's done that in the past, it has not worked out well for them. And so in this situation, when we're looking at Juneteenth, it does represent there's hope and there's joy to be found in celebrating Juneteenth, but also recognizing that it was the starting point for still a lot of people. Don't ever underestimate man's ability to enslave and oppress and abuse other human beings made in God's likeness. And it's so it's something that is worthy to be celebrated, and I'm thankful that it's now become more prominent in our culture, and I'm glad to know about it. That I've celebrated July 4th my entire life, and we'll continue to.
Sure.
It represents a very important time in our history that kind of set some things in motion to hopefully get to a point that we're getting now, where there is more equality as years go by. And we're not perfect. We're still working towards that. But
right.
I love that Juneteenth is celebrated. Well, I talked with Greg Ely on here before about Juneteenth, and he grew up probably different than both of us, because he said in his church, and especially I don't know that he learned it from the school system, but he learned it from his church, and his church would have a celebration, and it's just something I wish I could have maybe participated in and celebrated along my brothers and sisters that I just never have had the opportunity to until recently.
Well, I have a greater appreciation because growing up all the way till I left home, I never knew, I'd heard of Juneteenth, but never knew what watch night service was about. And I hated it because, it's like, it's 8 o'clock and I'm going to church.
Why do I got to be sitting here all this time?
Yeah. And then I got to try to stay awake because it's disrespectful to fall asleep in church.
And it goes till midnight.
Midnight, and then it goes a little bit after because they don't go.
We're partying,
it's
dog.
midnight. Go home. Yeah. And so never knew why we were doing that. All I knew is that black churches were doing it, and my white friends, which I had a really mixed community, weren't, and they were just like, dude, I'm sorry to be you. And it's like, that sucks to be you. Anyway, so, but then I find out that, in 1863, that January 1st was going to be the date when everybody was free.
Yeah.
And so they stayed up because they were going to go, wow, we'd made it, and stuff like that. And so, I wish I could go back having been armed with the information that I know now, because it would have made.
Wow, my ancestors were sitting around. It's called Watch Night because they're watching the clock that night before the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect. And my ancestors are sitting there watching the clock, waiting until
I can't even believe this is going to happen.
Yeah. Like I can't. Yeah. And and the fact that like churches would have this, do Watch Night services. That's the beauty and hope of the gospel. There's freedom not only in Christ for our souls, but we're not meant to live under enslavement from other people either.
No. And there is I mean, I just can't begin to completely understand what it means to be spiritually free and physically free. To be out of bondage both ways has got to be just the most incredible experience, spiritual experience that you could ever have. So
So how do you discuss things like this, or just issues of racial injustice with people that look like me, or somebody who's maybe not as educated with the background, not necessarily just Juneteenth, but just kind of racial inequality within our country in the past and into today? How do you discuss that with people? Do you have certain things you go to kind of get them on board? Like, what are your conversation points that maybe somebody could adopt that's listening?
Yeah, you know what? I tell you what, Juneteenth is, it's much more, but it's also a conversation starter. So I get to start a conversation again. Like I said, to me, what happened at that starting point we talked about, I mean, so now you get the 13th Amendment, and then you got an all-out war in the South against trying to, you see a black person working and making a great living, you're going, well, I'm not doing so great. I lost my plantation, and I don't think I like you, and I, again, you can see how the human heart would want to fester in evil right there.
Absolutely.
But a lot of times I let other people drive the conversation, because what I have found, 99%, maybe 98% of the people I talk to are not coming from an adversarial point of view. Yeah. They don't know, they have an opinion. It may be shaped by social media or whatever. And so I kind of just poke around the garden until I find a weed, and then I let them talk about it. And then, I'm armed with all of this, and to me, it's more than just historical knowledge. It's having the spiritual background as well, because you learn to have grace, and how to, lovingly, talk to people about their perspectives, even when they're wrong. Because you don't, like, if you go, well, I just think, that black people should be earning as much as whatever. And so I see that that's lodged in your brain. The way for me to unlodge it is not be going, well, you're an idiot, Jeremy.
True. That's so huge, though, man.
It is,
because to enter into these conversations with grace and compassion for the other side, even if you think they're completely wrong and way off base. Anytime we feel like we're being taught a lesson, we're a lot less willing to listen. Oh boy! It's like, why don't you just sit down, shut up, and listen to me talk and tell you why you're so wrong. We're so much less willing to do that. And that goes to how I have to lead a church. Over the last couple of years, we've gone through some changes where we believe the position of deacon is open to females, and that was a new change for our church. And so we had to have a lot of conversations just like that. It's not me just coming in and like, okay, let me tell you why you're throwing. Like, listen, I've gone through the same changes in my own theology, and so I had to take it from that perspective and just try to help them. Excuse me. People in our church understand why we came to the conclusion that we did, and it's not cultural, it's not social media, it's anything. It's what we believe the Bible teaches, and if you believe, and back to this, if you believe the Bible teaches that we are all created in God's image with value, dignity, and worth, that all actually means all, and it's not limited. And so I've said many times that we look to the First Amendment, our freedom of speech, to be able to say what we want and speak without boundaries. And I was like, the Bible's going to restrict your speech a lot more than anything else. And so the First Amendment may give you a right to speak your mind, but the first and second commandment is going to make you shut your mouth a little bit more often and maybe open your ears.
I give people point of encouragement, and I tell them this, because I want them to have a frame of reference of having these conversations and stuff, which is being in a relationship with, with your wife or your husband. We are very different people. I've discovered that women are not like us, So, but if you're going to have a good relationship, you're going to have to listen.
Yeah.
You're going to have to ask questions, and you're going to have to, in some cases, just go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But if you can do that in a marriage relationship or with a friendship, then you can do it with this. It's the same skill set. It is really the same skill set. So
No, what I've loved about Unite KC and the different environments, we've been able to go to, whether it be the Second Saturdays, different events, or Walk for Unity, or any number of things that I've had the privilege to go to with you guys. There's something in the air where I just feel comfortable. It's like, I'm not always going to ask the right questions. I'm not always going to say the right things, but I know that I can have a conversation with these people because we have the first things foremost, that Jesus Christ is what unifies us and brings us together, and oneness is what's going to tell our world that we're followers of Jesus more than anything else. And so that gives me not a green light to be ignorant, but a green light to maybe sound stupid at times as I'm trying to navigate some of these conversations and get to know people that have a different background than me, and understand how I can really validate the image of God in them as well. So I'm just so thankful for what you guys do, and providing a space for that.
I will say this too, and I'm going to look at the people. I said, look, if you are a white person trying to understand Black culture and all the other things that Jeremy and I have been talking about. Jeremiah.
That's your other partner.
That's other guy. That's right. There's a real Jeremiah. But, Black people and other people of other races can be just as uninformed about white people. And we can make some pretty graphic, characterizations about people. And so we have to ask questions too. I was privileged. And I'm going to tell you, when I say privilege, I was put into an all-white setting, or just about an all-white setting, for 6, 8, 10 years, And so I had to ask questions, and I had to observe behavior and see what was right and what was not, and how people think. And it gave me a leg up when I started deciding that I wanted to live a life that wasn't, homogenized. I wanted to live an expanded life, not only in my corporate life, but my personal life and stuff like that. And so, I learned a lot, by asking questions and risking sounding ridiculous,
So in regards with Juneteenth and any of these conversations, what I would encourage people, and I'm sure you would too, is just be curious.
Yes.
Be compassionate and be curious. Don't feel like you've got all the answers and have it all figured out. Don't feel like I've got Black people cornered. Like I know what they're about. Like I know what Juneteenth is. I think it was the first conversation with Greg about Juneteenth that we had on the podcast that I learned about the watch services. I'm like, that is fascinating, and it's beautiful, and what a way to remember. And so like, I have a decent understanding of things, but like that's something I had no part of before. And be compassionate, be curious with one another. Thank you for coming on here today, man. Hey, I really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
It's really fun. I'm looking forward to, I know you're going to be doing some stuff with us in the future. You're going to come back and speak in August and do some training with our staff. So I'm looking forward to that too.
That's going to be great. We're going to have a great time. And I will bring the best donuts in town, guaranteed.
Where's that from?
That is from a little place off of 291 highway called, you don't know?
No.
Oh, I think I'll leave that as a surprise.
Oh, come on now. Tell the people what they want to hear.
It's right off of 291 and 29 highway, and they have the best donuts in Kansas City.
All right, I'm going to look it up. It's not Krispy Kreme, right?
Oh, what? Blasphemous man that you are.
Dude, I love Krispy Kreme. I do. There's some one of our area ones here that we highlight a lot is Hannah's Donuts. They're great.
I heard about them.
Yeah, Hannah's Donuts is great, but I'm gonna have to look up 291 and 29 Highway. I have to look this up.
It's right there. You can see it as you're getting off the ramp, and trust me,
there's a beam of light coming down
That's
upon
right.
the donut shop. Is it one of those that sells out? Like I got to get there early type thing, or is it?
No, they're all day long, and as long as they got
Going
the
for
right
lunch.
recipe, they only went through a blip once where you could tell somebody in there
Somebody don't know what they're doing.
didn't know what they were doing. So
Yeah.
all right, sir.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And if you guys want any more information on Unite KC, you can go to their website, unitekc.org. We'll link to all that stuff below. Anything else that people need to know about that you would want to share?
No,
about?
Jeremy, like I said, it's if you look up Juneteenth, there's about 3 paragraphs on it on any page that you look. It just briefly talks about what happened before and what happened after are the conversation pieces that go along with that narrative.
Yeah.
So it's really cool.
Yeah.
Look into it.
Yeah. Well, thank everybody for joining us. This has been the Equip Podcast, equipping you to live out your Christian life as you faithfully love God and love others with truth and grace. So now let's go do it.